Peter, why don't we begin with the stimulus program, because it looks to me like one giant pork program. A lot of people are saying this is the big hope. This is going to pull us out. A lot of references are being made to the New Deal. This is the next deal, or maybe what we'll end up calling this the raw deal.
They're calling it an economic stimulus, but it's not. The economy can't be stimulated. It's not like a car and you just step on the gas and it goes faster. The economy needs to contract. The economy was too bloated. Our GDP was better than 70% consumption. That was ridiculous. And Americans were just spending too much money. They did so because they believed in the fantasy of ever appreciating real estate prices. And we need to retrench. We need less spending. We need less consumption. We need to replenish our savings. And especially since we need to rebuild our capital. We need more factories. And entrepreneurs, if they're going to get credit, Americans are going to have savings to provide that credit. So we need a lot less government. We need this contraction. And all the government's going to do with their stimulus package is stimulate more of the problem. It's going to lead to an increase in spending and an increase in debt. And the economy is already suffering because of an excess of both.
Well, let's talk about the implications of that, because we were already heading for a $1.2 trillion deficit before the stimulus. Who knows? We may have a $2 trillion budget deficit. How are we going to pay for this?
Look, we can't pay for it. What really stimulates an economy is less government, because government is a burden on the economy, that we have to be productive enough to support the government. And the less the government interferes, the smaller the burden it places on the economy, the better off we all are. Part of the money that they're going to be spending is to go to the states. And Barack Obama said, we're going to give money to the states so that the states don't have to reduce their spending. Well, we want the states to reduce their spending. The states are spending too much. The states are bloated. They need to make cuts. The last thing we want to do is interfere with that process. And we want the government to get smaller. That's what has to happen. And we need individuals to act responsibly. If we simply borrow a bunch of money from the Chinese and the Japanese and the Saudis, we're just digging ourselves into a deeper hole. And if they don't lend it to us, and even if they do, eventually we're going to end up printing all the money, and all we're doing is debasing the value of our money, and we're going to add massive inflation or hyperinflation to an already weak economy. And if we think the economy is in bad shape now, imagine how much worse it's going to be when interest rates and consumer prices are spiraling into the stratosphere.
Well, the other bad thing about consumption, too, is there was a paper done by the Levy Institute on this. And they were saying that, look, if all we do is stimulate the economy, and because so much of the things that you see at Walmart in the stores aren't made here, all we're doing is, if we stimulate it and it all goes to foreign producers, this is unsustainable and we're actually worse off.
Right, but don't even talk about it stimulating the economy. The economy does not benefit when we spend money. Right? The economy benefits when we save money, when we add to our productive capacity, when we make capital investments. So it's not the economy that's being stimulated. It's simply consumption that's being stimulated. And if you're stimulating too much consumption, you're undermining your economy, because an economy grows based on underconsumption. And the problem is we consume too much. We indulge it ourselves. We need to spend less money. Let's take a look at the automobile industry, for example. Bush and now Obama are talking about the fact that we need more credit so Americans can go to the showrooms and buy more cars. Well, how can anybody look at the American economy and say that our problem is that we don't have enough cars? That's preposterous. We have bought so many cars in the last several years. We are loaded up with cars. The last thing we need is new cars. Why should Americans buy new cars when the cars that they already own are perfectly functionable? And in fact, why should we go into debt? If you're an American citizen, you've already got a lot of credit card debt, you got a big mortgage, and you got a car that functions. Why should you go deeper into debt to buy a new one? If you don't have a lot of debt and you have a lot of money in the bank and you want to buy a new car because you can actually afford it, fine. But if you can't afford it, should the government be subsidizing you to go into debt to buy a new car? No. We need to make cars. We need to export them to people in other parts of the world that don't have cars that can actually afford them.
What about the also concept, if you take a look at what they're trying to do, these bailouts, and you know that the way that you make housing affordable is if we overbuilt, you allow the prices to fall. But we've got a program now with TARP where they're going to take $100 billion and prevent these houses from going under, their prices falling, so they've identified it. You know what? The problem we have is falling housing prices, so let's stop that. We'll bail them out. This isn't how you correct things.
Yeah, well, remember, falling home prices isn't the problem. Rising home prices was the problem. Falling home prices is the solution. But the government doesn't want that. I mean, here you have a government whose chief motivation is to maintain housing unaffordability. They want to maintain home prices at an artificial level. Look, if we've got a weak economy and people are losing income and losing jobs, isn't making shelter more affordable? Isn't that a good thing? Isn't it a good thing if we could buy a house for less money? I mean, why should the government try to artificially maintain housing prices, especially in California? Even now, with home prices down, how many times median household income are home prices in California right now? You know, it's absurd. California real estate prices should come down dramatically, and it's actually finally happening. Why should the government try to put a barrier to try to prevent the free market from functioning? All they're going to do is create a surplus of houses, which is what they've done. And of course, when you maintain houses at artificially high prices, nobody is going to want to lend anybody money to overpay for a house, because it means they're not going to get their money back when they stop making their payments, which means we're going to make the entire mortgage market a function of the government. We're going to socialize the entire housing industry, and all mortgages are going to originate from the government. This is absurd.
Well, you know, it's amazing. Who was it? Santayana said that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and here we are. This almost reads, Peter, like Rothbard's Great Depression. I mean, we're following the same tactics.
Yeah, well, because they're going to create another Great Depression. Remember, the solution to the problems now, what Barack Obama wants to do is dramatically increase government's role in the economy. We want the government targeting the industries for success and those for failure. We want the government picking which companies get bailouts and which companies don't. They're basically taking control over the resources of this country, over the distribution of wealth, and over the factors of production. And if you look at Barack Obama's speech, what did he talk about where wealth comes from? He said, we need to make sure that the wealth goes to the workers who create the wealth. Well, that's right out of Karl Marx. You know, it's not workers who create wealth. It's the entrepreneurs who employ them. But we've got somebody in there that really doesn't believe in capitalism, that doesn't believe in the free markets, that thinks he and his intellectual buddies can go to Washington, D.C. and micromanage the economy more efficiently than market forces. That's the bottom line. That's who we've got going there. And if we think that we're going to erect this gigantic federal government that's going to creep its way into every aspect of the economy, that somehow that's going to produce meaningful economic growth, that we're all going to be better off because we adopt the principles of Marx and abandon the principles of Adam Smith, that's nonsense.
Under these circumstances, and given that we're doomed to repeat history, where would you be putting money?
Anywhere but here. You know, I mean, they are going to completely destroy not only the value of the dollar, but the capacity of our economy to generate legitimate economic growth. I mean, we're going to be an economic wasteland for years to come, maybe decades to come. I mean, things are going to get so much worse, and I can already see what's going to happen. You see, Barack Obama is going to say, you know what? I told you it was going to get really bad, and you know why it's so bad? Because Bush and his free market capitalists screwed it up so badly that even though we had all these stimulus and rescue packages, that it still wasn't enough. And the reason the economy is still so much worse now is because we didn't do enough. Our stimulus plans weren't big enough. So now we need $2 trillion. Now we need even more government because the problems are so bad. But meanwhile, it's the government that's making it worse. It's because the government is interfering with the free market. We're never going to solve these problems. In fact, we're going to exacerbate them. And the worse the economy gets, the more power the government's going to grab. The more individual liberties and rights we're going to surrender, and it's going to be a self-perpetuating spiral that's going to disaster. If we thought the 1930s were bad, if we thought the Great Depression was bad, wait till we see what the government creates this time around.
Well, it's going to be an interesting year. But, you know, you said something about free markets, and that's the thing that you hear a lot in the press today. People are making reference that the free markets failed. We haven't had free markets. When you have a central bank that artificially lowers interest rates, when you have governments that interfere in the markets the way that they're doing today, that's not a free market.
No. You know, this is always what happens. It's just like, you know, just the way they blamed Hoover for the Depression. They said, well, Hoover was this free market capitalist. The